And what's so scary right now with the left is that this guy, Raphael Warnock, is extraordinarily radical in his leftism. But even the left-wing establishment, even the people who would be considered in the center, in the mainstream of the liberal establishment, are pushing unthinkably radical ideas. I think of somebody like Bill Gates. Does it get more establishment than Bill Gates? He is a typical left-wing, billionaire, liberal guy who's always trying to involve himself in public policy. Bill Gates was just on Jake Tapper's show on CNN. Why? I couldn't possibly tell you. He was asked about the lockdown. What should happen? Remember, we had 15 days to slow the spread back in March. Now we're 9 or 10 months later. For some reason, this is still going on. And Bill Gates, brought on, says, well, what are we going to do? Unfortunately, probably another 4 to 6 months at least of shutting everything down.
Well, certainly mask wearing has essentially no downside. They're not expensive. Bars and restaurants in most of the country will be closed as we go into this wave. And I think, sadly, that's appropriate. Depending on how severe it is, the decision about schools is much more complicated.
As a general rule, whenever Bill Gates has an opinion about politics, you can assume that the opposite is the thing we ought to do. Bill Gates is notoriously, infamously ignorant of political prudence. And the ideas that he does have about politics are really terrible. I mean, wicked, bad ideas. Now here he just says, okay, we need to shut down businesses for another 4 to 6 months because we haven't put every small business out in this country. And so we got another 4 to 6 months. That'll really do the trick. Says it's too bad, but look, that's just what we have to do. There's no downside to wearing masks. I could name a lot of downsides. One, we're social animals. We're supposed to see one another. It's nice to see a smile. We are supposed to breathe the fresh air. You can't do that with a mask. We're supposed to speak. One of the defining features of humanity is that we have speech. When you put that mask over you, you are literally putting a muzzle on yourself. Now, but because Bill Gates is a technocratic liberal, he's not taking political or ethical or philosophical considerations into his thought here. Because he just accepts all of the liberal premises about the world, some of which are contradictory. So he just wants to talk about what works. There's no downside. I think there are a lot of downsides to the masks. He's even admitting by saying that, right, maybe there's not a lot of upside. That's the implication. But look, there's no downside. Of course there's a lot of downside. One of the other downsides, of course, is that we're told if people wear the masks, we can all return to normal. And I said from the very beginning, that's complete BS. The masks are not going to calm people down. They're going to whip people up into a frenzy because the masks are a symbol that we're in the midst of this terrible, unprecedented pandemic. We've never had masking such as this before, certainly not in our lifetimes, and really not ever at this scale. So just to see the mask is not to say, okay, we can return to normal. It's to say we're not even close to normal, and we're not going to be back to normal until we take the mask off, which I think is a large part of the political symbolism of the masks. But then he goes a little further. It's not just 4 to 6 months. And you'll notice a lot of big business guys are all for the lockdowns because the lockdowns have caused a historic amount of money to be shifted from small businesses to large businesses like Amazon, Apple, all these sorts of online, Google, right, all these sorts of online companies. But it's more than 4 to 6 months. It might be over a year.
Certainly by the summer, we'll be way closer to normal than we are now. But even through early 2022, unless we help other countries get rid of this disease and we get high vaccination rates in our country, the risk of reintroduction will be there. And of course, the global economy will be slowed down, which hurts America economically in a pretty dramatic way. So we'll have, starting in the summer, about 9 months where a few things like big public gatherings will still be restricted. But we can see now that somewhere between 12 to 18 months, we have a chance, if we manage it well, to get back to normal.
Just a quick question. I guess I'm a little confused here. Who appointed Bill Gates to run all of our public policy for us? Why is Bill Gates is not saying we should do this, we ought to do this. Hey, I'd like to persuade my fellow citizens to do this. He's saying this is what we will do. This is what we are going to do. Because Bill Gates is one of these masters of the universe who influences public policy in enormous ways. And he's saying this is what's going to happen. Bill Gates is a great avatar of the kind of liberal establishment, the liberal, political, bureaucratic, obviously technological, entertainment, media establishment, the blob, as we refer to it. And Bill Gates is a key figure in that. He holds all the politically correct views, and they're pretty radical. You know, he's a dorky guy who wears a sweater, so he doesn't seem that radical. But in many ways, his views are more radical than even someone like Raphael Warnock. In many ways, the liberal establishment's views are more radical than the woke radicals. There are a lot of crazy conspiracy theories going around the internet about Bill Gates. This is according to the media. Crazy, wild conspiracy theories that Bill Gates is interested, for instance, in population control, that he doesn't want, especially in the third world, people to have babies. And so he's very involved in ways to limit the growth of the population. And I think these conspiracy theories are so crazy. In order to believe these kooky, crazy conspiracy theories, you would have to listen to Bill Gates himself.
Well, the population growth issue at the global level is not that daunting. That is, the population percentage-wise is growing slower today than in the past, and so it will actually peak out. The problem is that the population is growing the fastest where people are less able to deal with it. So it's in the very poorest places that you're going to have a tripling in population by 2050. And so their ability to feed, educate, provide jobs, stability, protect the environment in those locations mean they're faced with an almost impossible problem. Northern Nigeria, Yemen, Chad. And so what we need to do is take this aid generosity and this innovation and go into those places, offer the women better tools where they want to space birthing or have a smaller family size, and improve health, because it's amazingly, as children survive, parents feel like they'll have enough kids to support them in their old age, and so they choose to have less children.
This point of view that Bill Gates is pushing is morally abhorrent. It is evil, it is wicked, and he's been pushing it fanatically for decades. He is trying to make sure that there are fewer babies born, specifically fewer little black babies in Africa and fewer little brown babies in the third world. That's not an exaggeration. He has been foisting abortion on countries that are traditionally opposed to abortion, foisting contraception on countries that are traditionally opposed to contraception. These ideas of a sort of sterilized society for a very long time. In 2009, this sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, there was a secret meeting held between Bill Gates, George Soros, I know we're not allowed to say his name, but George Soros, Oprah Winfrey, a number of other left-wing establishment billionaires. Warren Buffett was there. You can Google it. I mean, it was a secret meeting, except it did leak to the press, and it garnered substantial press attention at that time. All of it was designed around this issue of overpopulation. So we were told overpopulation is a terrible problem. This is all based on the crackpot theories of a scientist, a Stanford scientist named Paul Ehrlich from the 1970s. Ehrlich published a book first in 1968, and then it was republished later on, called The Population Bomb. It said absolutely the world population now at that time it was around 3.5 billion, and we're going to have mass starvation, mass death in the 1970s and 1980s. It's guaranteed to happen. The only question now is, can we sterilize people and coerce abortions enough to limit some of that misery? And actually advocated not just getting people voluntarily to do this sort of thing, but advocated governments coercing that. As a result of these crackpot theories, you had Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister of India, start tying water and access to electricity and access to medical care and ration cards to sterilization, so sterilized population. You had China adopt the one-child policy, which caused upwards of 100 million babies to be killed through abortion. Absolutely wicked, some of the worst atrocities committed in human history because of these crackpot, stupid theories, which were not true. The scientific expert, Paul Ehrlich, who was a sort of neo-Malthusian, to use the technical term, referring to a scientist from centuries ago named Malthus, who had the same overpopulation fascination, it just wasn't true. Since the late 1960s, the world population has doubled. You go from about 3.5 billion to 7 billion, or 8 billion, or obviously growing still, and world hunger is at an all-time low. It just didn't happen. And these moral perverts like Bill Gates and other people pushing this politically correct moral standard, which is utterly opposed to human life, which says that, to use Paul Ehrlich's term, that the births of all these babies is a cancer that needs to be cut out. These guys are pushing this view despite evidence to the contrary. These brilliant experts, these eggheads, these people who are focused on data and science and the liberal standard. You know, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there are some kind of actual crackpot theories about Bill Gates, but you've just heard it in his own words. I can't imagine anything worse than that. That is what the scientific establishment is telling you, and it's because maybe they know something or a thing or two about science. Probably they don't. Guys like Paul Ehrlich maintained their professorship at Stanford, continued to win lots of prestigious awards, even though his central thesis was wrong and led to untold human misery. And they certainly know nothing about morality or even a political prudence. And the left is pushing this from the establishment.